Hello, everyone, and welcome to Traffic Corner Tuesday. My name is Paul Kerr, the Client Relationship Manager at CountingCars.com, and I'm your host for today's webinar. Today, we are discussing why the traffic engineering world should be collecting 48-hour turning movement counts. Before we dive in, remember, we want you to join the conversation. Please use the chat box on your screen to ask questions or share your experience throughout the presentation. Depending on the question or comment, we'll try to discuss it immediately or circle back to it at the end. The Traffic Corner Tuesday webinar series is brought to you by Mike on Traffic, which is part of the SPAC Enterprise family of companies. SPAC Enterprise consists of a group of traffic engineering companies focused on helping you create healthy transportation systems and fix broken ones. Please visit our websites, countingcars.com or spacconsulting.com to schedule a call to discuss your transportation equipment and study needs, or simply learn about how we can help you. Today's presenters are Mike SPAC and Brian Fiesick. Mike is the creative force and principal writer of the industry-leading blog, Mike on Traffic. Brian is the vice president of SPAC Enterprise and regularly contributes to Mike on Traffic, as well as co-hosts these webinars with Mike. Both Mike and Brian are licensed professional engineers and certified professional traffic operation engineers. The core purpose of SPAC Enterprise is to improve transportation globally. Both Mike and Brian take this purpose to heart and are constantly thinking about how our industry can evolve to provide safer and more efficient transportation. Mike's especially excited about today's webinar because it covers a kernel of an idea he first had when he was an intern way back in 1994. Before I turn it over to Mike and Brian, I want to personally invite you to stay on until the end of the webinar. We're going to tell you about an exciting launch of another innovation that will help you do your job more easily, effectively, and profitably. Our new guaranteed 72-hour data turnaround account cloud. Without further ado, take it away, Mike and Brian.
So thanks, everyone, and thanks for your patience while we got those slides figured out at the beginning and launched for you. So we're going to kick it off with a little ancient history lesson here and talking about how the history of how we've evolved from where we started to where we are today. And kicking off, the Highway Capacity Manual was first published in 1950. And in there, it had calculations done by hand with slide rules, and the data was based on a 2-hour turning movement count. Mm-hmm. At least that's our understanding of the history. That's what we were taught.
Predates us, but yes, that's as I learned it in school. That's the way it was brought up. That's the way we first looked at things, and they taught us how to do this stuff by hand.
So here's a picture of what the world looked like in the 1950s when we started doing capacity analysis here in the United States. And this is a photo from Tyson's Corner, Virginia, which it was sleepy little kind of gas station mom and pop store on the corner of the main intersection there. And then Bryant was able to pull up the aerial, that's the background, and that's from the 1980s. You can kind of see that's the same corner, a little bit bigger, more suburban intersection. And then
yeah, we're on this corner, kind of this street here. You can see it's no longer a dirt road, multiple lanes, turn lanes. It's getting bigger.
And then the shocking, not shocking for anybody who lives out east, but what it has become. This is huge shopping mall area, freeway, just big multimodal hub. One of the bigger, interesting case studies from a traffic engineer standpoint. So that's kind of the backdrop of, we started with 2-hour turning movement counts way back in the 1950s, and largely was based on that's the kind of data we could collect.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I mean, you look at those photos and that's probably realistically all we needed at that time.
Yes. So now the evolution of the tools we used, and Bryant and I, unfortunately, it kind of in retrospect feels like we were hazed, some kind of weird fraternity thing, but we both had stints at the beginning of our engineering careers where we were sent out with a clock in our car or a wristwatch and a clipboard, and we did tally marks and tried to remember every 15 minutes-ish to look at the clock so we could fill in the grid of a turning movement count.
Draw a line and start a new grid or something like that. I have memories, I won't call them fond, of being out in the snow, sitting in a chair, watching a sleepy corner in one particular instance and going, why am I out here? This is ridiculous.
Yeah. Thank goodness my parents talked me into being an engineer. It's really paying off. And then this was revolutionary technology. The handheld count boards, JMAR being the dominant player at the time. And this came in right at kind of the beginning of our careers, kind of the 1950s. They always had the back page ad in the ITE journal. And it was a big day when we got a couple of these at the consulting firm I worked at, because you didn't have to look at the clock anymore. You didn't have to do the tally marks, and you could download the data into these fancy new DOS computers we had on our desktops. But this was a leap forward, and greatly made our lives easier. And that's where things kind of stood for
quite a while, about
20 years.
20 years.
And now, kind of we're getting into this kernel of the idea Paul mentioned. I was an intern back in 1994 with a company called Image Sensing Systems, and they ended up developing the autoscope, which is used for video detection to control traffic signals instead of loop detectors. And working way back then, it dawned on me as I'm sitting in my traffic engineering class with a clipboard and pencil for a school project, and then working inside this technology company of, some days it sure seems like computers and video cameras should be doing turning movement counts. And this was Myovision came onto the scenes 7-8 years ago, and kind of broke through with this idea. And that, as many of you know, didn't work for our companies, Traffic Data Inc. and SPAC Consulting, the cost model. So we ended up developing our own camera systems, which we rolled out and formed countingcars.com, which hopefully many of you know about. And right there on the right is our 2-pound hold in your hand camera that you can set out and get 50 hours worth of recording and plug in booster packs and get a week or two worth of recording. So we don't have to sit out there in the snow in a lawn chair anymore with a clipboard.
Yeah. Except for hazing, no longer do you need to do that. Obviously, there's some value for younger engineers to learn a little bit of that history and why we do what we do. But other than that, there's absolutely no reason you should be sending people out with a clipboard or even a JMAR board at this point.
Yeah, we don't use highway capacity software that's on a DOS computer. We don't use slide rules anymore. The technology is evolving.
Yep, time to move forward. So with that, that's kind of our precursor into what this one is about, and it's why we're using 48-hour turning movement counts. So this, we go through the technology here and why everything's been upgraded, and now, just like the book, we should no longer be doing peak hour. It's our view that we should be doing 48, and in our practice, that's what we do. We collect 48-hour turning movement counts.
Several years ago, we switched over to using 48-hour turning movement counts as our default at SPAC Consulting for all the studies we do. So let's flip over, and we're going to run through 10 benefits we see as traffic engineers, as PTOEs, of why to switch to 48-hour turning movement counts. And the first one is, anyone who has gone out and put out tube counters knows that it is less than ideal technology. It is inexpensive way to get data at a spot, but tubes break and nails pop up and they trip people, and there's all kinds of disadvantages to tube counters, that if you have the video camera there and you're getting a 48-hour turning movement count at an intersection, it's pretty simple math to get the entering and exiting volumes on every leg of that intersection. So all of a sudden you have the ADTs for 4 different roadways by putting out a single camera that is on the side of the road, and your staff doesn't need to enter the road.
Yep. So that's kind of the 1B of that, is besides instead of just ADTs on one road, you get it on all four at the intersection. It's the safety of it, and frankly, the efficiency of it. You can send one person out, they can set up the camera, and then they can go back to the office. They don't have to worry about it. Whereas if you look at the picture we've got, some of the busy roads, you want two people out there. You need one to put the tubes down, and you need somebody else to be watching for or slowing traffic or whatever that safety that you have for your setups is. And you both need to be out there completing that task.
So the second benefit is traffic varies day to day. We all know that intuitively, and if you've looked at days worth of data, it's not shocking to see a 10% difference from one day to the next. And by looking at multiple days worth of turning movement counts, we can see if we have an anomaly. And sometimes we should study that anomaly, as the red bar there on the right shows. We have 2 days worth of data and kind of ebbs and flows around the peak hours, but hey, for some reason we had a peak hour event on day 2. Well, maybe there was an event at a nearby intersection that forced people over, or maybe the first day there was some school was off, or I mean, there can be many explanations.
There could have been a crash at the block next, and people had to divert around it for that 15 minutes or whatever that time frame is. So plenty of reasons. While if you're only doing peak hours on one day, you may have captured that anomaly, and that's what you're studying. And that can lead to overbuilding.
Yeah. Or that anomaly could be on the day one, and day one was the anomaly, the low one, and really day 2. So you're not going to see this in every data set you collect, but kind of those, when you do see big variation from day to day, it should give you pause as the engineer doing the analysis to dig into why there is a difference.
So our benefit number 3 is you get to average that. So just like the anomalies, most often you will not have those, and you will be able to take your 2 sets and average them. And so we're showing an example here. This could be a left turn movement. And if we count on one day and we have 275, a standard guideline for us for left turns is you need 300 to use dual lefts. So
that's a common rule of thumb.
So if you're sitting at 275, you might look at it and say, we're good, we don't need it. Meanwhile, on day 2, if you had counted just exclusively on that day, you're at 325, and now by default, you're going, we need dual lefts out there. Where
the real answer is you're right on the bubble, and you need to do more analysis and thinking, and it's not a black and white scenario anymore.
Number 4, so traffic control warrants, and they're generally signal warrants, although people use them for stop signs, for roundabouts, all-way stops. There's a variety that you can look at them. But the old way of doing it, and we're going to talk specifically about how the MnDOT process, Minnesota Department of Transportation, they had it written up that you would do your peak hour counts, and you would do
2 peak hours morning and PM.
At the intersection, and then you would put tubes on each of the legs, so you would have the daily counts on each of them, and then you would factor your turning movement counts throughout the day.
Yes.
So that's one thing that you're making an assumption on.
And then they had a detailed procedure, I'll call it, for kind of reducing the right turn volumes, because especially if you're looking at putting in a signal, they don't benefit that much, those right turning volumes, if they have their own right turn lane. And so they had a set of criteria for making reductions, but it was all estimating based on cross-referencing the tube count data with the peak hour turning movement count data. And all of this type of estimating back and forth completely goes away if you're collecting 48-hour turning movement counts, because you can take out your right turn lane, your right turn volumes, and get the correct number of lane configurations in your warrant analysis. And you can look back and forth. You can look at the 2 different days. You can look at averages. There's been
the real numbers that you're putting into the warrant analysis. So it's just, instead of an estimate, instead of a 2 hours that you're looking at, you've got the full day. It's just a better way to look at those warrants.
And it's easy to dump all of those hours in and look at the 8 busiest hours for the warrant analysis, instead of just assuming that your 8 busiest are between the peak hours,
right,
which is usually the assumption.
Usually.
So the next, here's a great photo of me from a public hearing. That the 5th benefit is adding credibility. I've been in multiple city council and planning commission meetings, public hearing testimony, where a resident will come up and say, well, your analysis is wrong. It is very busy out there and you're saying it's fine. And when did you collect that data? And how did you miss that? Well, if you only have a single snapshot of a 2-hour afternoon peak period, going back to the idea of the anomalies, you may have missed it.
Right.
And by having multiple days of data, you can say, we looked at average conditions, we looked at peak conditions, we did statistical analysis back and forth. And I just think it makes it easier to sound credible in front of those governing bodies. Whereas if you're only doing a 2-hour peak hour count, you really are open up to somebody who has a statistics background to shooting holes in your credibility.
Yeah, definitely. We actually had a project in Indiana where this specific question came up, and it was the project was close to a school, and they questioned whether we were looking at the right peak hours, and we were able to have more data to show them, yeah, we considered it, but the school peak that you're referencing is lower than the PM peak. So
yeah,
that's why we went.
Days.
Yeah, that's why we went the way we did. So it was a very easy way to have that answer right at hand.
Yeah, and I always go back to, it's crazy. We often make 7 to 8 figure decisions of building infrastructure based on a 2-hour snapshot. I don't think anyone with the statistics background would agree with that approach.
All right, number 6, you've always got the video as backup, and there's a couple different ways this falls in. So it's not all your eggs in one basket, as our clever graphic shows. One, there has been in the past where we've done our quality control on the counts, and we've looked at them, and something is off. You have a dip, you have a series of zeros. Whoever the counter was when they were reviewing the video just missed something, and you can notice that problem, but now you can go back to the video and check it. You have that backup to look at and say, yep, so you missed those counts, and we're going to recount it and put them in there.
Yeah, over at Traffic Data Inc., we were doing a huge data collection project within the city of Minneapolis, and came back that account had 0 volume coming out of one leg of the intersection in the morning, and it went back to the video, recounted it, and it was accurate. It was the 4th leg was coming out of a strip mall. None of the businesses were open yet in the peak hour, and we were able to verify for the client that no, that data is accurate. Whereas if we didn't have video, we would have went out there and recounted it. The other benefit is if you have a person on your staff doing the counting, this can be a quality control metric against them of somebody keeps goofing up. You actually can start to document it, where if you're only putting a person out on the street corner, there is no verification.
Mm-hmm. The last one on this, where we've done it a couple times, we try not to, but if we have a project that we think is moving forward, we're pretty confident in it, but we don't have the contract yet, we've gone out and collected the video at the intersections we've needed, and we just hold that for when the contract does come through. So it's a way for us to spread that work out. We knew we had some other stuff coming up. We knew we were going to be busy. We got those videos beforehand, and then when the contract did come through, then we were able to use them and count them.
Okay. So the seventh benefit is us as engineers, we are not out there for this whole count period, yet we need to understand what's going on. And it is recommended that for your studies and your work, you get out there in the peak hours and drive around so you get a feel for the operations. But you can't be at every intersection for the whole peak period. By definition, you're driving around. So if you have these videos, it is easy to scroll through them. It's easy to scroll through those videos back in the office and can really save time on and give you a better glimpse into how things are working, which then, going back to the credibility slide, as you're talking in the public hearing, you fully understand the background and you've had a chance to scroll through and get a sense of how it's working instead of just relying on models.
You can confidently say you've observed the operations out there. They're matching what your computer is telling you. All those things that breed confidence in what you're doing. Number 8, we have signal timing, and what this specifically talks to is your timing plans and your time of day plans, or how your coordination runs. A lot of times you're just picking it, and it may be you need a PM peak hour, so you just pick 3 to 6 or something like that. You develop your plan, that's when it's implemented, and you move forward. Once you have those counts over the course of those 2 days, whether you average them or look between them, you can clearly identify where your timing plans need to start and stop. And maybe it is 3 to 6, but maybe it's noon to 8. Maybe it's
maybe you only need one signal timing plan for the whole day.
Yep.
I mean, but by having the 48-hour turning movement counts, you can look at that trend of entering volumes and start out with a data-based decision versus just hitting up a default and saying, we collected a couple of hours in the morning, couple hours in noontime, couple hours in the evening. We're going to have those 3 plus an off-peak plan.
Exactly.
Which has been kind of standard operating procedure, but we can be much smarter and do much better with signal timing.
This also gives you the opportunity to choose either day. If you are evaluating your peaks, you've got a couple different numbers that should have some slight variations. And if you just want to double check, you've got that ability to go in and do that now. Check 2 sets of volumes for your timing.
Yep. So the 9th benefit, and it looked like we had about 3/4 of the folks on the line were consultants, excuse me, is really, if you're upping your game with these previous 8 ways we talked about, you're doing better analysis, the right kind of clients, the ones you want to be working for,
exactly,
who trust you and are willing to pay for better analysis, you should be winning more work. So this can be a competitive advantage for you in your local environment. And that has come through for us. That public hearing video snapshot of me was at the City of Edina, a good client of ours. And there was a competitive proposal situation with the city for an impact study. Ours was more expensive, but when they dug into the proposals, the competitors were scoping out 2-hour peak hour counts. We went with our standard 48-hour counts, and we had already, City of Edina appreciated all of the benefits of the 48-hour counts, and they said, yeah, you're more expensive, Mike, but we're going to go with you because we know if we made the other firms rescope with 48-hour counts, they would be more expensive. It was very close even with us putting in the 48-hour counts, but it set us up really as the experts and was a competitive advantage differentiator.
It was a value add for them, and they recognized right away that we were providing them more value, even if those 2 contract numbers were different.
Yes, and getting back to the credibility in front of the public hearing, that there are several advantages we talked about that on bigger, more interesting projects tend to be more controversial, and you need to be much more confident in explaining your analysis, that all of this kind of weaves together.
So our number 10-ish, it's still related to longer counts, but not necessarily the 48 hours. But what we're talking about here is leaving the video out for a longer period of time, where you have Different land uses that don't necessarily conform to your commuter time periods. So we have a picture of the Mall of America here, big retail store. For those who don't know it, it is definitely the Mall of America. It's big size, but if you're doing a study out there, your AM peak is going to be nothing. The shops aren't open. Why would you be out there counting? But your noon period might be higher. So with the 48, you've captured that, but also your Saturday might be higher. Your Friday night with movies might be higher.
Yeah.
So looking at these other time periods, you can extend that video and you can decide where the real peak is, and is that Saturday noon an important one to study, or have you captured it with something else?
Yeah, we've throughout the history over the last 17 years of Traffic Data Inc., we've counted around a casino multiple times over the years. And it was painful in the old days with those JMAR count boards of mobilizing a crew of 16, 18 people to be able to count from 10 p.m. to 2 in the morning on a Friday night to capture a concert and the casino activity. Now we put a camera out there in the morning on a Wednesday or a Thursday and pick it up on Monday and count that video. The increased cost is negligible, where it was a 10x cost to mobilize our staff on a Friday.
Similar vein, I also did a study at the Minnesota State Fair. At the time, we did not have the cameras, so it became very complicated to try to set up tubes, to be out there to observe the different periods, although I didn't mind being out at the fair for a week straight. But looking back now, if we had had the cameras for that situation, we could have recorded the whole time for probably not much more than what we did with tubes for only a few days, and much less hassle and much better data.
And Q is, if you've worked with tubes, you know that cues over the tubes lead to inaccurate data in slow moving vehicles. So even collecting tube counts out at a state fair, that is very questionable data. Whereas when you're counting from video, you know that that's accurate data.
We did some great QC on it though, so I'm sure that study was fully accurate.
So those are our top 10 reasons of why we have fully adopted 48-hour turning movement counts inside SPAC Consulting. And so now we want to move from why to how and to who, and leads to, for those who don't know, that one of our companies is countingcars.com, where over the last 6-7 years, we've really developed what we believe is the best video camera on the market. And we've also developed a video processing service that we're happy to process your videos, but we're also happy to sell you the system so you can count it in-house on fast forward speed. And Paul alluded to this, that we've been working on this for more than a year, where at our service called Count Cloud, where we process the videos for you, we were pretty loose on our deadlines because we were building our processes and systems, and we're happy to announce that we are fully confident in those processes and systems to the point where we're guaranteeing 72-hour turnaround now for your turning movement counts, which is really important from a consultant's perspective, that you want your data back pretty quickly. So we're happy to announce that. We have different promotions as well as free demos going on. We've really moved to a demo model with all of our products. We want you to try before you buy to make sure it's a right fit. But step one in that process is going on to countingcars.com and clicking the free consult button, where we do the first step to make sure that it looks like there would be an ROI for you. It looks like it's a good fit.
Right.
If you're only doing one turning movement count a year, go out there with the clipboard or hire somebody else. But if you're regularly doing turning movement counts, our gear, we can typically show payback within months, not years. So please go out there.
And this is the gear that we use for our studies.
Yes.
So it's been developed through our own use, through helping clients with their turning movement counts, doing our own studies, making sure that we get our data back. I mean, we're our own client here, and we want to make sure we do the best for ourselves. So just another way we try to prove it to ourselves first, and then we roll it out to other people as well.
Yeah, as many of you know, with Traffic Data Inc., SPAC Consulting, and Counting Cars all under SPAC Enterprise kind of superstructure, we're our own best client in all of those kind of, and each one goes to the other. So we are our own guinea pigs first. So free consult, you can schedule a half an hour with Paul to go through it and figure out how to get the demo and the different promotions we have going on.
Yep. And that's countingcars.com, obviously, if you didn't see it up there in the corner.
Okay.
All right, so we have hit 1 o'clock. We do want to say thank you to everyone who's attended. It's great to see the number of people here. But we are going to stay on, and for those who are willing and can stay on, we're going to answer your questions. We'll bring Paul back in a second. We'll go through the poll, all those things. So just, again, for those who have to leave, thank you for attending. We hope to see you next month. And for those who can.
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me via email if you have any questions about this, if you need to sign off right now.
All right, real quick, let's do the poll. So we had quite a few of you attend. Let's go ahead and hit end polling so people don't try to do it like they did last time. Thank you. So where are you located? The majority of you were from Central USA at 36%. We had 28% coming in next on the East. And the West and International, West USA and International came in tied at 18% each.
Interesting.
65% of you are with a consulting firm, 33% are with a government agency, and 1% is
one of
you is a data collection firm. Most of you have been in the business 20 plus years at 35%, then going down to 11 to 20, and so forth.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
So most of you have the experience of sitting out there with the clipboard and emphasize with us on that one.
Your standard turning movement count for a majority of you is 2 hours. But if cost wasn't a factor, which very interesting is 86% of you said you should be doing 48-hour, which brings us to one of the first questions that we had, which was in the state of Minnesota, do you use 2 hours signal warrants in Minnesota? Indiana, where Brad Yarger is talking about, requires 12 hours per the MUTCD.
We do all of the warrants. So there's the 8-hour warrants, the 4-hour warrants, and then the peak hour warrants. MnDOT's policy in several counties strongly discounts the 4-hour and the peak hour warrants in the analysis and really makes their decisions based on the 8-hour warrants. That's what
in the majority of the cases.
Yep. Yeah. And of course, anybody who's been in the industry for 20 plus years knows there's the unwritten political warrant that often comes into play, where if the politicians want the signal and you can meet a peak hour warrant, good enough.
Right. So yes, in Minnesota, they are driving towards that 8-hour. They're driving towards more data, but it's not yet required, and there's no set way that you get that. So as we talked about, there is the process of getting peak hour turning movement counts and tube data, and some places will still accept that.
I'm going to address this one. Alan asks, for the 48-hour count, do you use software to automatically count the vehicles, or does someone else sit there and watch the videos? Alan, that's one of the things that we can go over in that consult that Brian and Mike talked about. I think that we can definitely get in that and go more into that. I want to address a few more things pertaining to the webinar. Tony Trammell want to give you guys a little bit of food for thought. He said there are hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions in reality, which are programmed and or constructed based around single peak hour of data collections. We have never in the past looked at the sensitivity of this data, nor its impact or design improvements. Looking at more data always lets us have better design solutions. So we also need to look at the weekday versus weekend data, which you guys talked about. And having 2 days may let us average the 2 days, but ideally, would having a whole week be even better?
Yes, but, and there's always the but in there. This is something we researched, put out to the ITE listserv, Institute of Transportation Engineers. We did some research on it, and with some of the software we use now, we could do analysis on multiple peak hours. We could count 3, 4, 5 days worth. we come up with a whole range of probability based on, it's 75% likely you need dual lefts in this based on all these different variables. So we have gone down that route before.
We spent a good part of a year internally trying to see if there's a probabilistic way to do this analysis. And the punchline is our clients wanted a black and white recommendation from us. And especially other consultants, if they're reviewing our studies, and the more we dug into it, saying it's 80% likely you'll need a dual left turn lane, didn't answer the question of should we put in a dual left turn lane or not. So we are data guys. So we love having more data. We look at seasonal factors for the embedded loops that are constantly collecting data. So we take those things into account. Certainly, if your budget allows, a week-long count would have benefits. One could argue the Monday and Tuesday may not have much benefits unless there's an anomaly, but certainly a Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and lots of scenarios.
Yep, and we've done the 96-hour counts in some places where we've collected Thursday through Sunday. So we can see those different things, and we can make decisions on what we analyze with that. I think the important thing to keep in mind, though, is that whether your client is private or public, they want definitive answers. They're going to be looking for whatever process you do, you need to come up with a definitive answer, and you need to be able to defend it.
There's quite a few questions, more countingcars.com related. So I'm going to, not going to take your time on not to belittle anyone's questions, but there's quite a few things that are very specific towards that and not towards the webinar that you guys had. So I think this is a good time. But Chase, Brad.
So please email those questions directly, or if you think this could fit your business or agency, please go on the website, schedule your consult call for those very specific questions. We're happy to help you figure out if we're a good fit. And frankly, we don't want to sell to clients who are not a good fit. We are not interested in selling you a paperweight.
And for those of you that are in here, you hear me tell you that all the time. Do you want to announce the promotion, Mike?
Sure. Yeah, the promotion we have coming up. Well, of course, we hit on the demos where if it looks like a good fit, we want you to try out Count Cloud or get Count Cams in your hands. No obligation. But we have a promotion helping kick off this new 72-hour guarantee where if you buy 4 Count Cams with booster packs, we will give you 4 48-hour turning movement counts, so 1 per each camera, so that you can try out 48-hour turning movement counts with each of your cameras. Not that they're going to be any different between the cameras, but to give you a bunch of free data, and that is about $1,800 worth of Count Cloud for a 48-hour turning movement count. We charge about $400 to process that.
Excellent. So yeah, so Mike brought up the demo. Go ahead and hit the console. I'm more than happy to take your time. On behalf of Mike and Brian, I think this is a great time to end it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. And lastly, I will say we hope you join us next month, where we'll be talking about a neighborhood traffic calming experiment. We got some different pictures in the back there, but trying some things out. So this should be an interesting one, the case study on what we did and how we experimented before anything permanent went out there.
Thank you, guys.